Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. We bring you the OGs, we bring you the up-and-comers. So today's guest is an up-and-comer. He's a relatively new black belt, I guess, but he's been just short of 3 years on the black belt. He's under his teammates of Brentos and mine at Dominance in Abbotsford. He's also an AFL tackling coach. He's got a pretty famous surname, and we're going to get to know him a little bit better today. He is Max Viney. Thanks for joining us, Max.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Welcome, Max. It's always good to see you. I've trained with you a little bit. You've come out and taught a few lessons, which I've really enjoyed all of that sort of stuff. Can we talk a little bit, go through your journey, because you've had jiu-jitsu going through your blood for a long time now, right? Like, you started pretty young.
Yeah. I was pretty lucky. I got to start jiu-jitsu at around 14. It's funny, like, whenever you talk to other people about starting early in sports, you often hear, oh, this person's been doing this sport since they could walk. But in jiu-jitsu, we have so many late adopters that even at kind of 14, 15, it's still considered early. So, I was lucky enough to start the sport at around 14, and then I'm 27 now. So, been doing it for a bit over a decade now.
And what got you into it?
Why?
I had started with karate and stuff as a really young kid, and in some of those classes we got to do a little bit of grappling, but it was kind of like, it was more like sumo wrestling. Like, you just had to push another kid out of a square, sort of thing like that. And that was always my favorite part of the karate classes. But everything else, I thought, this is a bit boring, a bit slow. And then I lived next to Adele Fornerino, who's, pretty much Australia's most famous no-gi grappling competitor at the moment, or probably gi and no-gi. So she's a couple of years younger than me. We lived on the same street, and she said, come try this sport called jiu-jitsu. And so I came to Dominance, did my first session with her, and fell in love with it, and have been doing it ever since.
You came up through the kids program at Dominance, then the juveniles program. There's been a heap of people that have come through there. How did you? I guess, how did you find it? What can you tell us about that program? Because that seems to have really created quite a lot of killers on the mats.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been at Dominance since day one, and, got a huge amount of love and respect for Dave Hart and Link and, Murray, all the guys that own the 3 gyms. And obviously I've met a lot of amazing people through the gym. The kids class was, it was interesting. It was never as busy as some of the gyms you see these days. Oftentimes it was just me versus Adele, and there was no other kids in the class. So, we kind of came up through the teens, and again, it was quite small, but I was lucky enough to have some amazing coaches. Dave Christopher, Link was my coach for a while. And then of course, when I got to 16, I moved into the adult classes and was lucky enough to train under Dave Hart. And I'm really lucky. I had so many amazing people along the way, from the kids classes all the way to the adult classes. So it's been awesome.
How was that for you as a 16-year-old in the adult classes? Like, not all academies do that. Was that a bit overwhelming for you, or you felt pretty good? Or
no, I think I felt pretty good. It was obviously like a bit daunting, my first few classes, because you're grappling with fully grown men and women who've got more experience, more natural strength than you. And I was never a big kid growing up. I'm not a big adult now. I'm on the shorter side of things, but I think I was quite lucky growing up. I had an older brother who, we watched plenty of WWE together, wrestling. So I wasn't completely new to grappling, fighting, or wrestling. So I think I could hold my own, but yeah, it was definitely tough as a small 16-year-old trying to hold my own against some of the beasts in the adult class. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of your family, Max, as Kim sort of alluded to, you do have a famous surname in the Melbourne circles, I suppose.
Mm.
As a sporting, so we could say a sporting family, did you try different sports growing up? And then tell us a little bit about pedigree, mate. You're up there with that, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, I probably had the traditional sporting background as a lot of other Australian kids. I just, I got introduced to AFL through Auskick from an early age, but I also played basketball, tried out cricket. Very typical sort of sporting upbringing. But my dad is a former player of the Melbourne Football Club in the AFL. So, he played around 230 games for the club, which I guess is considered, that's if you can get over 200 games in AFL, that's pretty good. You've had a pretty good career. And then my brother followed in my old man's footsteps, and he's also been playing for the Melbourne Football Club for over 10 years now, and he's just recently tipped over 200 games. So, I guess there was thoughts of, am I going to play footy? Am I going to go down that path? But I don't think football was for me, and I found this weird sport called jiu-jitsu, and I like that
Yeah.
much better. So here we are.
It's so
But you
interesting,
do
isn't
have,
it? Like, we can get funneled into, and I had this growing up, right? So, um, I was a smallest kid, like very, very, very skinny. So, rugby for me in New Zealand was pretty hard to play when you're. I think I was like 13 years old and 30 kilos, so I was like really small. But I played
Yeah,
soccer
that's
for a
hard.
long time. Yeah, I played soccer for a long time, and I was good at soccer. I made rep teams at soccer. And my dad never came to watch me, like ever. He never,
Mm,
like my stepdad, never saw a single soccer game that I played. And then when I was
yeah.
like, okay, well, maybe I'll try rugby, he literally refereed the first rugby game I ever played. So, like, you can get funneled into these sports that your parents or your
Yeah,
family sort of want you to do, or if they're
yeah,
following something, you want to follow that. So, there was obviously
yeah,
no pressure for you to go down that Aussie rules path, but the
yeah.
jiu-jitsu side of it, were you supported? That, like, did you feel supported by the family following that path?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Like, I think a lot of people think because my brother was, he was probably known to go into the AFL from a young age. Like he was playing in a lot of the state teams and rep teams, so there was a lot of buzz around going to the same club as my dad in the footy circles. And I think just naturally being part of the same family, I felt a lot of that pressure or expectation on myself. But or they maybe thought that my dad was a militant guy and was saying you have to make the AFL or whatever, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I think uh, dad had a unique experience raising my brother and going into the AFL. So for me, I think he just wanted me to be happy in whatever I was doing. So if that meant playing football, then he was all for it. But I think he also saw that it wasn't necessarily where my heart was at, and so when I started jujitsu, he was 100% supportive. And I remember sometimes having some thoughts where I was like, oh, I wonder if he kind of cares because I'm not playing football. I'm doing this other sport. But I'll never kind of forget my first round robin tournament I went to, and he came along and I won it, and I did a flying armbar on a guy, and he filmed it, and then he kind of showed me how proud. He told me he was proud of me, and that he loved seeing what I was doing, and anytime I was introduced to any of my dad's friends after that, they would always say, "Oh, your dad's been showing me this video of you. He showed me about 50 times."
That's
So,
awesome.
I'm lucky to have the support from my family that I have.
yeah, that's fantastic. And so you have actually crossed over a little bit towards AFL, yeah? You're quite
Yeah,
involved with the tackling. Can you tell us
yeah.
about your role there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just spoke in the past 10 minutes about how I was never into footy, and now here I am in football. So yeah, like I've always followed football because obviously I watch my brother every weekend, and I do like the sport. I think I grew up kind of resenting it a little bit. And then, I kind of grew up, matured, and I was like, oh, it's a pretty good sport. So obviously, we focus in jiu-jitsu on taking someone to the ground and not getting taken to the ground. So that's pretty applicable in any of the football codes, whether it's rugby, AFL, and that kind of stuff. So it started out with me basically talking to my brother. I said, hey, I do some stuff at jiu-jitsu that I reckon could help you on the football field. Come into dominance, and I'll show you a few things, and you tell me what you think. And so he came in. We got a lot out of it. One thing about my brother Jack is he's probably one of the best tacklers in the AFL. So we were able to really bounce off each other and sort of come up with some concepts and techniques that work really well in AFL. And basically from there, I just started posting about it. And one thing led to another. I started working with other individuals from other AFL teams, and it kind of has led to the current day where I'm working at a few different football clubs and with certain individual players in tackling and evading tackles, and I've nearly become more of a tackling coach than I have a jiu-jitsu coach these days, which is interesting to see. But it's been really fun to work on the transferability between the two.
It's awesome to see somebody like your brother Jack, who is obviously very, very good at what he's doing. And you're like, hey, man, like this jiu-jitsu stuff might work for you. And people
Yeah.
could easily have just gone, mate, they're two different things. Come on,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to have that mentality of like, okay, well, let's check it out. Let's workshop it and see
Yeah.
how that works. Like, it's a great mentality, right? And then
Yeah.
that's how we get better at things, like saying
Yeah.
yes to things and like being open.
Yeah. No, totally. I think uh, there's been players that I've worked with who are so open to try anything new, and they are willing to take that leap and see the transferability. And of course, there's some other players who go, no, I only want to work specific football things.
Yeah.
But I think if you talk to anyone at the top level of any sport, they've all experimented with some kind of alternative recovery methods, training
Yeah.
methods, mindsets, and sometimes it's the next thing to take them to the next level. So, uh, I think when you talk about tackling, the act of taking someone to the ground, anything you see on the football field is rooted in wrestling and grappling. It's just
Yeah.
modified to fit a rule set. So for me, it was never this weird kind of huge leap from jiu-jitsu and wrestling to football, but part of my journey into AFL has been trying to show people the similarities and how they kind of relate. So it's a little bit of a persuasion game, but some people are much more open-minded than others and are happy to adopt. And I'm lucky that Jack was one of those guys.
And Melbourne Storm did this with the NRL, I can't remember, 10 years ago, at least 15 years ago, perhaps, right? And they had
Yeah,
a jiu-jitsu coach who
yeah,
came in and they
yeah,
literally changed the laws of the game so so that they could, combat what Melbourne Storm were doing so well. They were doing what they called chicken wing tackles and those sorts of things back in the
yep,
day.
yep,
So they actually changed the rules to
yeah,
stop some of that stuff happening. So it definitely
yeah.
works, and as you say, it's rooted in those stand-up positions, underhooks, all those sorts of things. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, like you were saying, rugby clubs and football clubs having wrestling coaches isn't new necessarily, especially during the preseason or the off seasons. Whether it's for mental resilience or the coaches say they want to toughen up their players or they want to improve their tackling. There has been a history of grappling in those sports, but I think where I've kind of found my niche is, I'm not so much about how do I make these guys as mentally tough as I can? How do I put them through the gauntlet, so to speak? in my opinion, it's not hard to make someone tired in grappling. The thing I like to focus on is how can I actually give these guys a skill or a technique that they didn't have prior, to make them that kind of 1% better. So that's kind of where I feel like I've differed in the AFL scene as compared to, you know, some other people in the past.
But can you give us an example, Max, of how you would, you know, start off with this, with someone like with some AFL players when they come in and your initial few sessions with them?
Yep.
What
Yeah.
sort of thing you do?
So a lot of the times it depends on the person. Some people have watched UFC before, or they've even tried jiu-jitsu, and they are happy to blur the lines between grappling and football a little bit more. So they're happy to try and pick up techniques by just sort of similarity. So let's say like an arm drag, for example. You're probably not going to arm drag someone in a football game, but what you might use is the concept of a hook grip, or staying sticky to someone, or using your whole body to hold on to something rather than just like your hands or your biceps. So if someone's a little bit more open, we can be a little bit broader. But what I find works with most people is going, kind of classifying the underlying concepts that result in you either finishing a tackle or breaking out of a tackle. And then from there, we start basic. And just like in jiu-jitsu, we then start adding different complexities on top of that, and different situations. So, for example, you might say, all right, this time you're getting chased by an opponent from behind. How do you break a tackle from there? Or this time you've got to tackle someone running front on at them. How do you make sure that you don't get sidestepped? And once you do make a connection to them, how do you take them to the ground without giving away a free kick or getting suspended or something like that? Oftentimes it's dependent on what position the person plays. So if it's someone who's 2 meters tall, then it might be a little bit more about just kind of body to body wrestling to like make space so that they can mark the ball. Whereas if it's someone a bit smaller who plays in the forward line, they might want to work on evading tackles a lot more. So there's a little bit of a kind of figuring out process, and then really it's just dependent on the player themselves. But I try to follow the jiu-jitsu training mindset of do the movement first, no resistance. Start adding some resistance in positional sparring or situational sparring, and then move into the full tilt 100% sparring. But obviously in a football context, which is something that's a bit new to a lot of the AFL guys I work with. They're not really used to that style of training. And I think it's one of the best things that they can take from jiu-jitsu.
It's really interesting. When I first started to play rugby in New Zealand, because I was a late adopter of the game, and so when I finished playing soccer and then I went to rugby, it was literally the last time I ever played soccer competitively, right? And went
Yeah.
to rugby as I think 12 or 13-year-old skinny little kid. And I had zero idea how to tackle. Like, I remember one of the first tackles I tried to make, I literally slid in like a soccer player, and this guy just jumped over me, looked at me, scored a try in the corner, right? And I'm like, I don't know how to tackle. But none of the tackling practices were broken down into this is the technique. It was just like, hey, man, just tackle these kids. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'd like
100%.
literally zero idea. But your Instagram account, especially because obviously that's all I see, like you see you teaching these guys the techniques. You see them walking through the position, and whether it's fighting for position, fighting for the underhook, whatever it is that you're teaching, and then weeks later or whatever, there's an edit of them fighting for the position in an actual game. So like it really is proof that what you're teaching these guys is working really well, Max.
Yeah, thanks. I totally kind of agree with what you're saying. Like, uh, I think a lot of the mentality in these elite level sports is if you got to be better at something, just do it faster or do it harder, or just put on more muscle, put on more size. But putting on muscle takes time, and what are you going to do in the meanwhile? So a lot of the times when I work with these AFL athletes, I'm constantly telling them to slow down, think about what it is that you're doing and why it works. Um, More speed and more effort isn't what's needed at the moment. It's the understanding of why it works so that you can do it across a wider array of situations. So yeah, that's what I said. I'm not about making them hurt or making them do it faster or harder or gassing them out. It's about giving them the techniques to make them 1% better.
And you're doing that across the whole year. It's not just a preseason thing for most of the players you work with.
Yeah. So right now, I mean, the season just finished in September. So, I've already been working pretty consistently with individual players during what we call the off period. So it's pretty much their free time. They could be in Europe or wherever, but the ones who are in Melbourne will come and see me. And then right about November, or kind of early December is when teams start their official preseason. So that's when I'll be doing a bit more work at the football clubs. And then come March to September again, that's in season. And that will typically drop off a little bit more because players are focused on just recovering from games week to week. But I will still either provide technical analysis from in game, or if the players are feeling up to it, I will do some more work with them. So it is becoming a 365 job, 24/7.
And you're working with the AFLW teams as well, aren't you? You've got some ladies on board, and you've been working with these ladies as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was lucky enough to work with Collingwood's AFLW team last year. And then this year I've been working with the Melbourne Demons AFLW team, which has been an awesome experience as well.
So how does it work? Are you like sort of contracted to specific clubs, or are you a free agent? You can work anywhere?
They just pay them
Yeah,
thousands, Kim, thousands.
I wish. I wish. I think my role within an AFL club is probably considered more of a niche role. So, some teams might have a dedicated tackling coach and some teams may not. Uh, I think currently how it stands at the moment, there's probably not, enough of a role for me to be a sole person at any one football club. So I kind of have to be a bit of a free agent in that sense. But exactly right, as you were saying, I get contracted to the football clubs, and the extent of my role is kind of up to them, whether they just want a couple of sessions in the preseason or whether they want to keep me on over a whole year. It's kind of up to them and the goals that they want.
Can you see this branching out anywhere else? Like, do you look at other sports, Max, and go, "Oh, there are things that I could be offering here"?
Mm,
Anything that creates positional play, right? Like hockey
yeah,
creates positional play, rugby, those
yeah.
types of contact sports, obviously, like basketball, it's all positional play. Like, do you see aspects for you to like switch in and out of different sports?
Um, yes, I do think, the further and further away you get from full contact sports like rugby and football, I think the more narrow the kind of potential skills that you might be able to learn become.
Yeah,
So I think because in AFL, there's so many angles that a tackle can come from. There's
yeah,
so many different ways that you can get tackled, whether it's over your arms, whether it's around your waist. Um, I think in AFL and rugby, there's a huge sort of applicability of grappling and jiu-jitsu, but you can definitely still get transferable benefits from training grappling in something like hockey or basketball, but you have to narrow down what exactly it is that you want to train and why you're doing it and how it's relevant in the sport, if that kind of makes sense.
yeah,
Otherwise, you're potentially just increasing your training load and your risk of injury
yeah,
for maybe a small amount of gain. But
yeah.
I definitely think there is. I want to personally branch out into the rugby scene. That's definitely a goal of mine. But yeah, at the moment I'm busy with AFL, which is kind of my priority at the moment.
So give us a name, mate. Give us a name of someone that you've worked with who you're like, oh, this guy doing jiu-jitsu would be like incredible?
Or I want to say my brother, but
I was
he's
gonna
one of
say
those
that.
guys. He's one of those
Yeah,
guys though that he wouldn't tap to a heel hook if you put him in one. Like
yeah,
so he always says, I reckon I'll get into jiu-jitsu when I finish. And, I think it's something both of you guys would understand is that you can't always be the hero.
yeah,
Sometimes you have to just kind of take your beating, learn from it and come back the next day. Whereas he's someone who's very like, no, I have to win every round, every rep. And I think that would get him in trouble. So,
yeah.
there's a player who I've worked with from the North Melbourne Football Club called Luke Davies Viney. And he has picked up jiu-jitsu in his off season. He wears, he trains in the gi and no gi, and he's a really good practitioner of the sport. So he's progressing really quickly, and I think he's got a bright future in jiu-jitsu once footy's over for him.
Awesome.
I wanted to ask you, Max, you mentioned that your brother was already like a pretty good tackler. Has he acknowledged that the help you've given him has improved him further, or he won't acknowledge that?
No, I'm very lucky with the credit he gives me. I think it's lucky that I worked with already a great tackler to begin with, and then I was able to kind of say, "Oh, look how good he is! It's all because of me." But no, I think there's definitely been parts of his game that I would say we can attribute to our training, especially on the evading tackles side of things. So shrugging out of tackles or breaking them. As Brentos was kind of saying, I've been able to kind of pair some of our training footage with some of the in-game footage. And I think it's pretty clear for anyone to see that the stuff that we're practicing in the gym is transferring in game. And I'm really lucky that he gives me the credit for it.
So your coaching side of it, you're doing super well. As I say, like you've run classes when I've been in them and they've been great. But individually, mate, you've competed a fair bit. When did you first sort of compete? Obviously, that round robin you were talking about with your dad, where you just hit flying, flying arm bars for fun. But sort of competition sort of go? Like, do you still want to compete? Are you just busy coaching now? Like, where do you sit with all of the jiu-jitsu stuff now? And like individually, in regards to that?
Yeah, I've definitely, I'm a competitive person naturally. So I've enjoyed my time competing over the years and jumping in some of the big tournaments. I was lucky enough to go to the World Championships when I was a brown belt and the Asian Championship in Japan. Uh, the international scene's really tough and it's really competitive. And especially once you get to the black belt level and you start to realize that there's a lot of dangerous people out there. You want to make sure that you are giving yourself the best opportunity to compete against those guys. So while I love competing and I definitely plan on getting back into things at some point, I don't think I'm giving kind of the competitors or the competition the sort of respect it deserves in terms of my personal training. Like I still train twice a day, Monday to Friday. Like I absolutely love the sport. Um, and sometimes I'm training in the gym like it's a world championship. But uh, yeah, I think with coaching, so much of your focus that usually goes to yourself and your own game is transferred onto your students. So it's just hard to find that balance. So for me personally, at the moment, competing's taking a back seat, but it's definitely something I'm getting back into when the time's right.
You're just waiting for that Masters division, aren't you, mate?
I'm waiting. Although some of the people I see in the Masters division,
Oh,
they look almost scarier than the adults division.
it's crazy.
What's the thing? Old man strength? When does that kick in?
I don't know. I'll let you know.
Uh,
Not at 51, mate. I'm not sure.
far
Hopefully
out.
soon.
What's
Hopefully
that?
soon.
What's that? What's that? Masters 21?
Yeah, something like that.
Like,
Mate, you are Dave Hart's student, aren't you?
Yeah. I've even
Actually,
got the shaved head like him now.
No, it looks great.
I'm just, I don't know if our viewers can see. I've got this photo
Oh,
here.
wow.
How
Hey,
how long
look
ago
at the
was
mop.
this, Max?
Oh, I actually
In the
wouldn't even be
day.
able to tell you. That was that was when Adele and I were still in the kids classes.
Yeah.
And it looks like I think that was when I just got my white belt for the adults class.
Yeah, so you've just been
So
promoted off the yellow belt by the look of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm probably 16 in that photo, which I don't know if I look 16 or
Mate,
not.
still look
Um,
12.
I know. So,
But wait,
I
didn't he
remember,
start when he was 14? How can he look 12? He looks even younger.
Oh,
yeah.
look, jiu-jitsu ages some of us, and it makes some of us look younger, maybe. I don't.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
What age
yeah.
did you get
it's
your blue
fun.
belt, Max?
I was probably maybe 17 on my way to 18,
Yeah,
or maybe 18. I'm not sure. Yeah,
yeah,
it all blurs together.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's quite quick, really, then. So if you're about 16 there, and then only a couple of years to the blue belt, I
Mm,
feel like people that start as kids have such an advantage because they've got that, even though you think at 14 you were a little bit older, like to me, that's still pretty young. I
yeah,
feel like because the kids have that awareness or that movement that just gets ingrained into them while their bodies are growing
yeah,
versus those of us who started as adults where we're already kind of fully formed, I don't
yeah.
know.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the neural pathways are still flexible,
Mhm.
and and I think one thing that's really helped me is my body kind of got conditioned to the sport.
Yeah.
Not to say growing up that I didn't have moments where my back was cooked or my neck was cooked, but I think it helped me understand where my body's in danger versus where it's not. And I think, yeah, training at a young age has helped me kind of, develop in the sport quicker when I started training more often. Because when I was younger, I was only training probably twice a week. And then I think when I got my brown belt, I started training kind of full time, and I was really able to accelerate because I had that younger background for sure.
I've heard Adele talk about that too, actually, Max. Like starting, she sort of was talking about when she started younger, that her body really adapted to like different positions. So, like, she's like, my hips are really flexible because I played so much
Yeah.
guard. And
Yeah.
you're talking about the neural pathways, right? And I suppose,
Yeah.
in regards to things like myelin and sheaths and that sort of thing, like having the flexibility and the the speed to get to a position because you've now done it so many times and so many repetitions when you were young, like those
Yeah.
myelin sheaths are just super thick and you can just
Yeah.
naturally do it, right?
Yeah. It's sometimes it's hard to tell if you are good at something because you're strong or you're flexible, or if you've just done it so many times over the years that you're just able to respond quicker than someone who's been doing it for less time.
Mm.
So definitely, if you've had more experience with, like we were talking about defending a straight ankle lock, you're gonna recognize when you're in danger so much earlier if you've been put in it 50,000 times before versus
Yeah.
someone who knows technically how to do it, but they don't know how to identify that they're in a straight ankle lock.
Yeah, the early warning signs, it's one of the things. So, yeah, as a blue belt, for me, I've got, it's not a habit so much, but knowing what's next in some positions, I literally have
Yeah.
no idea. Like I rolled with
Yeah.
Link today, and he stood up from closed guard, so I'm like, oh, omoplata's on, so I was trying to omoplata him. Then he postured up, and then at some stage he just starts laughing. I'm like, I don't even know what you're laughing at. And then he brought his hips forward, and I end up on my side and he's passed, and I'm like, that's what you're
Yeah.
laughing at, right? So we were talking about it later.
Yeah.
But those early
Yeah.
warning signs, as you start to do more jiu-jitsu and get better,
Yeah.
obviously that helps, right? So
Mm.
as somebody who's been training for quite a few years now, and then as a coach, when do you
Mm.
start to see these early warning signs for you? And then watching your watching your students, because you obviously coach a fair bit now. Do you
Yeah.
sort of see that at blue belt? Do you see it at purple belt, or is it individual?
Yeah, it's a terrible answer, but I really think it's individual. It's, it's not to say that once you hit your purple belt, you start reading the warning signs early. Um, a lot of the times, everyone's battle is different. Like for me, when I was a blue belt, the straight ankle lock was my arch nemesis. Like as soon as someone got my ankle, it was game over, and I would try and practice the defenses and stuff like that. And I thought, I was like, technically, I know what to do, but I still can't do it. I just can't get out. Um, and obviously, you might be training against someone who's quite skilled, so that helps. Well, doesn't help rather. And then you kind of leave it. You go, all right, well, I'm just going to try and focus on some other stuff, and then it might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 years down the line. It starts to click for you, and then you kind of make those gains. So I think it's different for everyone, unfortunately, and you just kind of have to stick with it.
Yeah, no, I agree, Max. I think, and that's sometimes what's so difficult about jiu-jitsu, especially for people when they first start. It can be quite confusing or quite overwhelming because it's so different. Different body types have different games. So,
Yep.
Sometimes you're going to be more susceptible to certain submissions because of
Yep.
your game or the way that you pass or the way that you play guard or the way that you stand up or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I wanted to ask you about recovery, Max. Like, you're still young, like you're not even 30, so recovery is probably not as much of a factor for you as it is for someone like Princess and I. But I guess also because you are quite involved with people at an elite level in the AFL, what's the latest in terms of recovery? Like, I know that cryotherapy and sauna and stuff was happening, was all the rage a little while ago. What's
Yeah.
on the cutting edge now?
Tell me it's a beer and a
Um,
Palmer. Tell me it's a beer and a Palmer.
uh, no, it's a good question. Look, I'm not sure. I know that at the elite level in AFL, a lot of it is about proper nutrition, proper sleep, and that's your non-negotiables. And I think I try to mimic that for myself. I've tried cryotherapy and infrared saunas and hot and cold therapy, and while it can give you a really nice on the day sort of body feel or body high, I've never really been able to associate a noticeable increase in recovery. So I think I'm a big fan of whatever works for you, whatever you find works for your body, but the non-negotiables for everyone should be your sleep and your nutrition. And if you like infrared saunas, do infrared saunas. If you like cryo, do cryo. So yeah.
That cold, like often you'll see video footage or a story on the news or whatever of the middle of winter. All the AFL players are down at the whatever beach they're close to, like,
Yeah,
and you look
yeah.
and there's 9 guys. You're like, oh, where are the others? I wonder. so,
Yeah.
so, like, I do wonder
Well,
about that cold therapy, and I'll tell you like a real
yeah,
quick story, right? So years ago, when I was a kid, I heard a story about a family friend or somebody who the family knew, and they were like cold shower, cold shower, cold shower. It's really good, and the guy had a heart attack in the cold shower, and I'm like, I'm out, like,
yikes.
and I'm like,
Yikes.
I'm like 12, I'm skinny, and I don't like cold water anyway. I'm like, yeah, this is a stupid thing. Like, I think warmth is good.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's like life's short. Have a hot shower. Like uh, don't get me wrong. Like all that stuff's great, and that's what I said. It's more personal. Like when I do infrared saunas, I come out of it. I'm like, man, I feel relaxed. Like that's awesome. But again, I couldn't attribute a percentage increase in recovery to it. But you enjoy it and it relaxes you. So if cold showers are what makes you feel alive, or a Palmer in a pot is what makes you feel alive, then go for it, you know?
So Max, your black belt, the day you got your black belt, it was the first time I'd ever been present when someone got their black belt. So it sticks out for me. It was a very, very cool experience to be a part of. Having, your friends and family and that sort of thing there was
Yeah.
obviously important to you. Tell us about that day, mate. It was like as I say, it sticks out for me, but it's a pretty cool day.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I think obviously everyone in jiu-jitsu thinks about the day they get their black belt, or that's the ultimate goal for a lot of people, and I was really no different. When I started out, I always said I wanted to be a black belt in something, but then when I started jiu-jitsu, I was like, yep, this is the thing I want to be a black belt in, because it was this kind of milestone, one of the hardest martial arts, or whatever it is that kind of gets talked about. So I got to brown belt 4 stripes, and it was a couple months before the grading, and then I started panicking. Like, I got a couple of indications that I maybe might get my black belt. So I remember, I'd send Dave messages. I was like, hey mate, I'm not sure if I'm in town. I might be in Adelaide. We might probably better to just wait till next year. And Dave was like, yeah. Like, I was full lying. I wasn't going to Adelaide or anything like that. And then on the day, he said something like, whether you're want it or not, if your coach thinks you're ready for it, then you're ready for it. But I came in on the day, and I didn't know. I maybe had a small inkling that I was going to get it, but I was a bit flat, I remember, because none of my family was there. I told everyone that I wasn't getting it because I was scared, essentially. And so Dave called me out, and everyone started clapping, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I was like, fuck, my family's not here. Like, this is something I've been working for 10 years, and they're not there. And then I remember Dave tapped me on the shoulder. He said, look behind you. And I saw my dad, my girlfriend Sarah, my mum, my brother all walk in. And at that stage, I pretty much just kind of broke into tears, sort of thing like that. And I saw my dad kind of tearing up, and some of my other family members, and it was a really, really special moment. And I'm super, super grateful that they got to be there for that. So, yeah, and looking back on it now, the belt doesn't really mean too much. You keep training, and you keep going down the journey. But it was a really special day for me, and I had a blast.
Fantastic. Do you have any final words, Max? Any words of wisdom for our listeners to round it off?
Hello, you there, guys? Sorry, I think you just dropped out real quick. So what was that, Kim? Sorry.
Just any final words to round us off, to wind it up here?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me on, guys. It's been really awesome chatting, and yeah, I really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome.
Find you, Max. So we obviously have AFL clubs listening to this, mate. So where can people find you?
So if you want to see any of my work in AFL and the tackling stuff I do, probably the best spot is to go on my Instagram, which is Max Viney Jiu Jitsu, or Max Viney JJ, I think, on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok as well under the same name, Max Viney JJ. But yeah, Instagram's where it's going to be coming out first. So if you're interested in the tackling and jiu-jitsu side of things, you can find me on there.
And you run privates. You do privates for people and all that sort of thing with jiu-jitsu away from AFL.
Yeah, when I can find time, I do. But the footy stuff's got me pretty busy at the moment. So yeah, mostly working at the clubs and stuff. But I do small groups and privates and stuff like that as well.
Awesome, Max. Mate, on behalf of both of us, Kim and I, it's been awesome having you on. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day. It's been cool getting to know you a little bit better and hearing some of your stories. I do want to say, hey, congratulations, Kim. We just had the Pan Packs over the weekend, and Kim absolutely smashed it. Came back out of a bit of deficit from the first match, won her second, and then had an absolute stormer of a final and got that gold medal, top of the podium on the Pan Packs. And that's your
Thank you.
14th consecutive Pan Packs. Is that right, Kim?
Yeah, of the ones that have
Wow.
been, there wasn't any in 2020 and 21, but yeah, pretty much since I've started jiu-jitsu in 2009, I've not missed a Pan Pack. So
That's awesome.
I think the
Congratulations.
IBJJF should give me a freebie, at least one, hey? I'd probably
Yeah.
spend over $1,000 just to that. But
Well,
yeah, thank goodness for the repper charge. Otherwise, I would have been out in the first round. That was it. Sorry, Max.
No,
It was awesome. It's great.
It's a huge achievement, Pan Pack. It's without a doubt Australia's hardest tournament. So congratulations.
Thank you. No, thank you. But this was all about you. So thank you so much once again, Max, for giving up your time. As you said, you're a pretty busy man, so we managed to squeeze this episode in. And Brendos, you want to do the wrap up of how people can find us and buy our t-shirts, please?
Yeah, let's do that. So, guys, as a reminder, check out our social media. We do have our Roll or Die t-shirts. They are really good quality. If you want an extra stripe, probably buy one for your coach. I think that's the most important thing. That's the easiest stripe you'll ever get.
Yeah.
Check us out on the social medias. And then as we sort of sit there and say, like, share what we are doing, share our posts. We truly appreciate it. But when you do see stuff that you like through the jiu-jitsu community, like, keep sharing each other's posts, you know, like, we discover people through people that you share. So continue down that path with everything. That's it for another episode of Roll or Die. We appreciate it. Remember, subscribe to these. Share the YouTube channel too, because that's really good. We love you guys. We'll see you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Woo.